Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I'm going to be reviewing Jack Kerouac, On the Road. So this was my least anticipated book on my 25 books to read on 2025 list. I ranked it as a projected 1-star read. My biggest concern with it was that I heard that Jack Kerouac is kind of considered a stream of consciousness writer, which is a genre I do not like, just because it seems like the writer makes things up on the spot. I don't really respect stream of consciousness writing because, in my opinion, like, I could write a book in a few days without even really thinking and just publish it as a first draft, and it would be as good or better, probably better, than books by like J.D. Salinger and William Faulkner and stuff. I just do not really respect it as an art form. For that reason, I projected On the Road as a 1-star read, my least anticipated book of 2025. I began reading it just before the new year. So just a bit of backstory if you don't know, Jack Kerouac is kind of considered one of the main figures of the Beat generation. And don't really take me as an authority here because, I mean, this is just kind of paraphrasing from what I've read on Wikipedia. But basically, like, the Beat generation is like post World War II, sort of like, late 1940s, mainly like 1950s. A generation who just kind of preceded like the hippie movement. So they're kind of like a countercultural group. Oh, Nibbler, what do you have? I swear, Nibbler, my conure, he does things like any kind of toys. Occasionally, Nibbler will get in his mind that he wants to use his toys to like dig into his food dish. And what he does is he like scoops the toy into the food dish and like knocks all of the food out of the dish. So there's this little toy here. I don't even know what it is. It's just some kind of little ball or something. And so what he does is he uses that to dig into the food dish and like just knock food out. So I guess that's his way of telling me like he wants new food. Speaking of which, I've been meaning to show you guys this. This is a picture I took of Nibbler a few days ago. So I saw he had a bottle cap in his leg or in his arm or whatever, and I thought it'd be funny what if I gave him another bottle cap? So I offered one and he put it in his mouth, and so then he had a bottle cap on his foot and in his mouth. So I think he's kind of like, uh-oh, what do I do now? Because he like doesn't have his hand and he doesn't have his beak. Both were occupied. I don't know, I just thought it was funny and he looked so cute. So as soon as he took it, I rushed to get my camera and take a picture. I love this picture. He looks so cute. Anyway, so the Beat generation, they kind of, Nibbler, what do you got now? Anyway, so the Beat generation, so they were kind of like a group of writers, especially like Jack Kerouac and like William S. Burroughs and some others. And they kind of tended to write about like some kind of spiritual or physical journey like across the US or whatever, and just their kind of like being. So they just kind of go around the country and kind of experiment with drugs and drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes and like a lot of like sex and sexualizing things and sexualizing women and just, sleeping around. And also like along with psychedelic drugs, like getting into like kind of Eastern religion stuff, Eastern philosophy kind of stuff, and just kind of out there things. And that's basically like the Beat generation, which kind of like turned into the beatniks, and then it kind of turned from that into the hippies protesting the Vietnam War and stuff. And so it kind of roughly ran from like the end of World War II kind of through the 50s to the 60s when the hippie movement kind of took over. Oh, I forgot to show off my shirt. So at work at the bookstore, about 3 or 4 times a day, I may get asked a question like, excuse me, do you work here? Because we don't have like, uniforms or anything. So we just kind of wear whatever, just casual clothing, whatever. And so 3 or 4 times a day I get asked, do you work here? People don't know, am I just shelving books for fun, or am I like pulling books off the shelf because I want to buy them, or do I actually work there? So I got tired of answering that question like, yes, I work here. So I got this shirt from Amazon. Yes, I do work here. I just thought that was funny, and like my boss and stuff, they thought it was a real funny shirt. Okay, so first, I guess with the good. So this was my least anticipated book for the year because I knew it was stream of consciousness, and I was just like, yeah, I will probably hate this book. So I began reading it just before the start of the year, and really at the start, I thought, this isn't really so bad. And for like the first, 50 pages or so, I was kind of like, even though it is stream of consciousness writing, it wasn't having the same faults or flaws that I felt with other stream of consciousness books. Like, it wasn't just like random sentences, whatever came to mind. It was real clear that Jack Kerouac had a clear direction for the book. Like, it begins with him wanting to go on this road trip across the US and stuff, and talking about his different friends, and they all have like fictional names in the book, but it's all based on real people. So like on Wikipedia, if you look up like the list of characters, it has a side-by-side list showing you the names in the novel and who that character is in real life. So anyway, it was just really direct. Like, the plot was very clear, so it wasn't just randomly written sentences. It was clear, like, okay, I wanted to begin this journey across the US. My friend so-and-so lives over in Denver. I want to go see him. So I set out, and, I'm going through New York, and then I'm hitching a ride through Pennsylvania and so on. And it was just real clear. It kept moving. So I didn't really see what would be so stream of consciousness about it. It looked like a pretty well thought out book. In terms of the writing, I did not think the writing was altogether that bad. Like the narrative, the stream of consciousness that I thought I would hate, I did not feel that so much with this book. It felt like a pretty enjoyable read. The prose was fine and all that. So it was all about this road trip this guy is taking and the friends he has and what happens along the way. So purely in terms of the actual writing of the book, the prose of the book, I thought it was okay, not great really. So it's nothing I would highlight like as real good writing, but I thought it was entirely serviceable writing. So in terms of writing, I don't really give it much flaws in terms of the prose. I can't say that Kerouac is a bad writer. Nibbler's taking a bath. So for this book, I was reading and I was enjoying it for the most part, but then I kind of got like 100 pages in, and I kind of began to get a little bit tired of the book because nothing was really overall happening. It was just kind of the same thing. So he'd go on a journey to somewhere, like originally I think he goes to Denver, then he's there for a few, I don't know how long, days or weeks or months, and then he kind of wants to go down to San Francisco, so he goes there and he's there for a little while, and he meets this Mexican lady and he's with her for a while. Then he wants to go back home, so he does, and then after being in New York or New Jersey, where he lives for a little while, his friends show up and they're like, hey, let's go back on the road. So then I think he goes briefly like on a trip to, I don't know, it's either north or south, but they do that. And then I think they go to like New Orleans or New Orleans or however you pronounce it. And then I think they head back to San Francisco. And it's basically at that point where the book lost me, because it's kind of the same thing happening throughout the book. Basically, they decide like, oh, let's just head out. I want to head out. I want to go to, the West Coast or whatever. And all along the way, the only thing they really do is just try to like sleep with women, and the language of the book is very much a product of its time. So he, like Kerouac talks in the book like he wants to make a woman, or he wants to make a girl. I could really talk a lot about the language of the book, and I know like a lot of people who would read this today would probably be greatly offended by the writing and just the things he refers to, like the way he refers to women and the way he refers to like some black characters and some gay characters and stuff. Real derogatory language from like today's point of view especially. And I think it's even clear in the time that, he probably knew it wasn't a good thing to be like referring to women and to blacks and to gays and stuff this way, but he does it anyway. And when I talk about like derogatory language, there are some passages in the book where I think at one point Kerouac says that he kind of wishes he would have been born as a black during the time of slavery, because he would have like not had any worries. Like if he was just born as a slave, he could have just lived his whole life as a slave, worry free. And that's basically how he views it. Like, oh, slaves, well, they don't have any worries. You know, they don't have to do anything like today where we have to have jobs and we have to like figure out a career and, you know, marry and have kids and be a dad and stuff, you know. Slaves, they're just like all worry free, and man, I wish I could have had that life. That's Kerouac's opinion. Oh, also in terms of derogatory language, I think there was this quote in the book. There was an old Negro couple in the field with us. They picked cotton with the same God-blessed patience their grandfather had practiced in antebellum Alabama. The same God-blessed patience their grandfathers had picked. God-blessed patience. That's how he viewed slavery. I did like this quote from the book, though. The only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time. I like that quote. That is a good quote. I don't want to like highlight that point too much, or like his other derogatory language, like his views towards women or whatever, the way he presents women in the book, because I mean that could easily like give the book like a just 1-star rating. But I kind of think on one hand, it is like the product of the times. So, I mean, this is just, you know, that generation. It's just how they viewed stuff. So, I mean, no, that doesn't excuse it at all. But, I mean, I think you have to understand that was more common at the time. But the reason that bothers me so much as a writer or as a reader trying to get into this book is because, like, for thousands of years, really, part of like the narrative structure of writing is that you're supposed to have some kind of a relatable cast. You're supposed to have a cast of characters that in some way readers want to root for, that you are invested in these people, that you want to see how their story pans out. And so what Kerouac does in this book is he has a bunch of characters. Chiefly there's himself, and then there's two of his friends who are kind of above the others. There's this guy Dean Moriar, whatever, Dean, and Carlo, I think his name is. Those are kind of the big three in the book. There's Kerouac, whose name in the book is Sal, and then there's Dean and Carlo. Those are kind of his main friends. Those are the main protagonists, if you will, the main cast of characters. And there is nothing redeemable whatsoever about any of them. There's nothing enviable about them. They have no good qualities. They're just not interesting people in the least. There's nothing about them that gives me any reason why I should like these characters or care about them. They're just not interesting people. So what Kerouac does in the book for his main characters, he doesn't even really let you know who these people are, like Dean and Carlo. He doesn't let you know why these people are friends. They're just friends, and they're like infatuated with each other. And I do want to kind of get on that point a little bit later. Hopefully I don't forget. But for these characters, Dean, Carlo, and Sal, why should I like them at all? What makes them interesting? What makes them good people? Or even if they're not necessarily good people, what is supposed to be interesting about their journey here? All they're really doing throughout the book is they go to some other place across the country or some other city, but you don't really even get any kind of major description about that place. Like they go to Detroit, they go to New Orleans. No, I'm going to say that worse every time I try to say it. I want to say New Orleans. I don't know. They go to that city, they go to Denver, they go to San Francisco and stuff, but you don't really get too much immersed in it, really. So it's not so much just like the setting of the book is like the main selling point. And there's even a line in the book where I think he says that basically every place is kind of like the other. So I forget which city he's talking to. It might be New York, or I don't know, but basically there's a line where he says basically like the end of town is like the same as any other town. So even from that standpoint, it's not like all these cities have real diverse fields. It's just kind of like the same, the town is the same for everywhere they go. I mean, it's just like a gas station, a place to eat, a place to drink or whatever, and a place to like stop for hitchhiking and try to get on a car to go to the next town. And then it's the same thing over there. And at each city or town or whatever, Kerouac like talks about like the women he sees and all the beautiful women and trying to like make it with the women. And a lot of times he does. And that's like part of what bothers me about the book is it's like, why are these characters getting all of these women? Sal and Dean and Carlo, why are they so popular with women? It's like they can just pretty much go up to any random woman in the book and just basically like they start talking and then they hold hands and then they go off and they make love or they make it with a woman or whatever and then they move on. And they treat their women pretty bad throughout the book, especially, I forget if it's Dean or Carlo is the main one, but like repeatedly in the book, the couple are like always having fights. And it's even described in the book how like the girl is like black and blue from the fight. So, I mean, he's beating her, you know? And for some reason, they're like still together. There's also a scene where they're driving across the country, taking their girlfriends with them or whatever. And I think they're using one of the girlfriends because she has some money. And as soon as she runs out of money, they say they just leave her in Texas. I think they just like bail on her. Just like, oh, well, our girlfriend is out of money. So, you know, hurry up, let's run out on her. And so they just leave, leaving her. Oh, I think it's actually in Arizona that they leave her. So they leave her in the desert. And so then they get to New York, and then like a week or two later, they get a call from the girl, and she's like, hey, I'm in, gosh, I had to say that city again, New Orleans. Like, hey, I'm in New Orleans. I'm waiting for you. I don't know where you guys went. You just left me, but I'm here and I love you. Come back for me. And it's just like, they left this woman in the desert. She could have died and they did not care. They're just like, hey, she's out of money. Let's get rid of her and just move on. That is the way they treat women. But still, the woman just wants to be back with the guy. She loves him. And it's just stupid. Like, why would you love these characters? You know, they beat you. They do nothing. They don't have jobs, a lot of them. They just drink. They do drugs. They sleep around. They have affairs. And, like, the one character, I forget if it's Dean or Carlo, he has, like, 2 or 3 girlfriends or whatever, and he goes from one to the other. Like, that's all he does all day, is he goes from one girl to the next and back. And there's also a scene where the guy, again, I forget if it's Dean or Carlo, he wants Sal Kerouac to sleep with his girlfriend for some reason. I think he says just to kind of make it interesting or whatever. He just wants to see how she would react. So they kind of like begin like a love triangle kind of thing. And there's some really weird stuff about it. So this is kind of a point I wanted to get to earlier. The way I say that Kerouac doesn't really describe the appeal for his friends here, Dean and Carlo, to me it kind of felt almost like had a homosexual element to it. Like, I do not know why these characters get along, like their personality or just their intellect or whatever. There's nothing about them that I could see why these people would be friends. The only thing that really made sense to me why these characters could be friends is because they kind of had a little bit something between them, you know? Like maybe they liked each other a little bit too much. And that is kind of why they have a fascination with each other. But it's not like kind of presented like they're that way. In the book, it's kind of presented like they're, you know, straight men and they're all into, you know, all these beautiful women and they want to make it with the woman. But reading the book, it just kind of feels to me like, I wonder if these guys are a little bit too much into each other. And so when the guy is like, hey, you know, I want you to sleep with my girlfriend just to see how she reacts to it. When that happens, that dude is actually in bed with Sal and the woman, you know, his girlfriend. And yeah, he's actually in the bed with them. The guy's like, come on, you know, get it on, you two. And so Kerouac or Sal, he kind of tries, but he can't really do it. So he's like, hey, buddy, Dean or Carla or whatever, like, can you go into the other room and let me try this? And so he does. And then for whatever reason, he can't quite do it still, but he tells her like, hey, don't worry. Once we get to like San Francisco or Denver, then we'll be a couple, just you and me. So really, I could keep talking about this for a while and just all the different moments in the book and why I think it's like so problematic or whatever. Like, just for instance, I mentioned there's like a Mexican girl in the book that Kerouac says, like, she was one of the most beautiful women he's ever seen. So he wants to make it with her. And, eventually, real soon into like knowing her, they just like sit on the bus together and then they like start holding hands. And then from that point on, they're dating basically and they're lovers. And she has like a 7-year-old kid or whatever. And she works like on a farm picking, whatever from the fields. And so she really wants to go to New York where Kerouac lives, or Sal lives, but they can't really afford it, so they work in the fields for a while. Why don't they just hitchhike, And that's the way like Sal got to the West Coast, was hitchhiking, but for some reason they don't want to hitchhike. So they work for like a period of several months, I think, or at least several weeks. And this is also a part where I talk about like just the way they treat women. So it talks about how they work in the fields, like her, the Mexican girl, and even like her 7-year-old son or whatever. He helps like pick whatever produce. And it talks about how Sal struggles to keep up with him. Like he has to fill this basket with fruits or vegetables or whatever. And, at the end of the day, they'll weigh it and that'll determine how much he makes. It says in the book how the woman and her son take their stuff they pick and put it in his basket because he's like so far behind. And even after doing that for him, for whatever reason, he decides like, hey, I'm going to go back to New York on my own. I think he tries to explain it like, hey, I'm not helping you here. I'm holding you back. So I'm going to go to New York on my own. So he does. And it's just kind of like, why would he do that? Like, if he loves this woman, if she's so beautiful and all that, and they're, making love all the time, and she's just head over heels in love with him, why would he just want to leave and go back to New York? And also, like, she has a 7-year-old son, and it's talked about in the book how, like, the son is, like, sitting on Kerouac's lap or Sal's lap or whatever, and just, like, how the boy is kind of bonding with him. He still leaves anyway. So it's like he leaves this beautiful girl and the son, who is like kind of growing attached to them. He's just like, no, I kind of just want to go back to New York on my own. So he does. And then when he gets there, you actually find out that he like marries some other woman. And then when I said how he goes to like New Orleans, gosh, I say it worse every time. New Orleans. They need to change that name. That's a terrible name. He's apparently has a wife already, and so when his friends show up, she like never even shows up in the book. Like it's mentioned that, oh, he has a wife now, but you never see her. Like, where is she? I don't know. But then he just leaves and leaves her to go back on the road. That was just kind of bothering me. And it gets back to the whole point of, why should I root for these characters? There is nothing good about them. They have no qualities. They have no positive qualities. They have no good traits. There's nothing about them that I see that, why do these characters like each other? Why should I like them? What makes them good or interesting people? Why should I care about what they're doing? And as far as like the whole Beat Generation thing, what are they really trying to accomplish? Like it talks about like how they're just trying to find themselves or whatever, they're trying to find their place. And what do? All they do is they drink, they smoke, they do drugs, they try to make it with women, and they treat their women like crap, and then they leave because they just get an itch to travel. So they go across the country and find other women and treat them like crap, and they drink and they spend all their money, and they like a lot of times don't have jobs. And so what does he do? He like calls his aunt up in New York to bum money off of her, and that's all he does. So they just go around drinking and partying and trying to make it with women, and then leave the women and go out and party some more and have more women and have more drugs. That's the entire thing that they're doing. So it's been said before that they're not the Beat Generation, they're the deadbeat generation. And I think that's a very apt term. So these people are just deadbeats. A lot of them are just unemployed, or they're just wasting all their money on drugs or alcohol or women and treating their women like crap and leaving their women. I think the reason why they are probably like so miserable or so beat down, Kerouac says, and that's like why he came up with that term, like, oh, this generation is beat, you know, we're just kind of beaten down. I think the reason why they are this way is because of their own choices. Like, they refuse to hold a job, and if they held a job, they could do stuff like they could get money and they could support a girlfriend, or they could support a wife, and they could have a family, and they could have a car, and they could have stability and stuff, you know. Instead, they're like, no, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to hitchhike and I'm going to blow all my money on booze and drugs and women, and then just leave the women. And it's no wonder why you're unhappy. You're having a hedonistic lifestyle. Your life is all about you, and you are not finding fulfillment in that. And I think the reason why is because fulfillment for most people would come through having a partner, for having a companion, for having a relationship, for caring about someone, for caring about someone more than yourself. But what Kerouac does here is they don't really work, and even if they do work, they blow all their money on booze or drugs or women or whatever, and not women that they care anything about. It's just about to have a one-night stand or whatever, and then they move on. And as a result, they're just never happy. They're always trying to find something that they want. And so I think that's kind of like, the reason you're unhappy is because you're unemployed and you're giving up on your jobs and you're giving up on your women. Every time you find a beautiful woman or someone you really like, you decide to leave them. And I think Kerouac kind of tries to tease you with this idea that he is going to discover something, that he's on this journey of discovery or whatever. He's going all around the country and he's finding his place. He's finding his purpose. But he never does. It's always just the same thing. So there is no purpose or whatever in the book. It's just a hedonistic lifestyle about just drugs and alcohol and partying and making it with beautiful women and then leaving them, and just like the pride of the male ego or whatever, like just being a cool guy and just hanging out with his friends. Like, that's the ultimate purpose or whatever. But he clearly doesn't get fulfillment from that. One more thing I want to talk about is, well, I don't know if it's one more thing. Another thing may come to mind. But another thing I want to talk about is that in the book, Kerouac and his friends, or Sal and his friends, I don't know exactly how to say it, whether Kerouac or Sal, but they are very much like intellectually snobbish or whatever. So like a lot of times for different characters who come across, especially for women, he'll say in the book like, oh, it was just a dumb girl or whatever. But he doesn't really even say how they were dumb or how they were stupid. It's just, in his opinion, oh, it's just a stupid person he's encountering. And what makes them stupid, he doesn't say. And what makes him so intelligent or whatever, he doesn't really say either. So I mean, they're just kind of like, I don't know how to say it, thumbing their noses or whatever at all the people they come across, thinking like somehow they are better than everyone else. They're on some like intellectually superior plane than everyone else, because for whatever reason these guys think they are like, they have it together. They are smart dudes. They're intellectual dudes. They're people who have a lot of interesting things to say, or like the things they think about are really interesting. And I really wish I could have like met these guys and been witness to like these different moments, because I think it would pretty evidently become clear that these people are freaking idiots and they don't have any kind of like appealing characteristics or whatever. They think they're real smart dudes and they write like poetry and stuff. So it's like, oh, aren't we creative? We're artists. We're intellectuals. But I don't think they are. What are the intellectuals about? I think they're just snobbish people and just intellectually like they think themselves better than everyone else for no reason. So I think that's also part of what really made me just not like these people at all, is because I could get like, okay, even granted their lifestyle, like partying and women and their views on women and everything, and their views on blacks and their views on gays and stuff, I could even look past all of that if I saw any kind of like inkling of intellect these guys had, or any kind of insight that these guys had, where it's like, oh, these people are making me think about life in a different way. but they don't. It's not even clear to me that they're thinking about life in a different way. I think they're just hedonistic. They just want their own satisfaction. They don't care about anyone else but themselves. They don't even care about their friends, I think. They don't even care about each other. And it's talked about in the book how they'll just kind of disappear from each other for a while. They'll just go away, and then they may not get a hold of each other for weeks or months or possibly even years. So they clearly don't even care about their friends. They don't care about their girlfriends. They don't care about their family, really. The only time this guy, Kerouac or Sal or whatever, contacts his aunt, who is kind of like his main family member, the only time he contacts her is to get money off of her. And it's the same thing with Dean or Carlo. There's a part in the book where it talks about how the guy is just kind of like waiting for, I think it's his mother, to die, because once she dies, he will get her house. And she hates his friends, but he doesn't really care. And he just kind of hates his mom and is just waiting for her to die so he could get the house and he could have all of his friends over. So that's just how these people react. They do not care about their friends. They do not care about their family members. They do not care about the women they are involved with. They don't care about anything whatsoever. It's a purely selfish lifestyle. And even with that, I could even understand, like, if they're getting some kind of insight about that kind of lifestyle. Like, I am learning new things just by pursuing my own interests, you know? Like, oh, maybe I was tied down with family, but, you know, when I finally broke free of that and just decided to live on my own, pursuing my own interest, maybe I discovered some other part of myself. I could understand the book if that was the way it was presented. But it's not. It's just, oh, I just want to do whatever. I just have an itch to go to San Francisco or whatever. Or I have an itch to go check on this friend of mine. But they never learn anything. They never talk about anything. They never share any kind of insight. They never acquire any kind of deeper knowledge. They don't do anything really. It's just about partying and drugs and women. That's their entire life. And they're not even happy with it. So it was just entirely useless to me. It's entirely pointless to me. So anyway, clearly I did not like the book, but I will say that for the first like 100 pages or so, I thought it was actually kind of a decent read, even though I didn't ultimately like the characters or care about them really. In part, I think it was because of Kerouac's prose, like just his writing. As I said, it's not altogether badly written. There's, in fact, parts of the book where I thought it was very good written, or well written. I can't speak English. There were like moments like with the Mexican girl. I really liked her as a character, and I really wanted to see what would happen with her. And like, you know, I was kind of already falling in love with her. I was like, I hope this is our love interest that we'll wind up with, because I like this person. I want to see how it goes with her. But nope, Kerouac's just like, I get tired of her. I want to go back to New York on my own. But it was well written, those parts, and you know, the characterization about all that was fine. I enjoyed reading that. I was invested in that. But kind of after like 120 pages or so, and it was just more of the same as just hanging out with Dean and Carlo and just dumping their women and trying to find other women. I was just like, I don't even care what happens from this point on. I don't care about these people. I don't like these people. There's nothing insightful these people are learning. There's nothing good about them. They're not good people. They don't care about anyone but themselves. I'm not even sure if they care about themselves. They're just entirely deplorable people, and they're deadbeats. The book really makes me lose interest in any other kind of like Beat Generation figures. So of course this was my first read by Jack Kerouac. Another one of the like prominent Beat Generation leaders is William S. Burroughs. We have a lot of books by him, I think, at the bookstore. And in the book, his character is like Old Bull Lee is his character. And I think he's one of the characters in, darn it, I had to say it again, New Orleans. But I'm just not really interested in him at all, really. I'm not interested in any of the other figures from that era, just because of the way Kerouac writes. Even though I think he's a good writer, I don't think he tells this story very well about this Beat generation. So I just don't feel like I care about this generation or that I empathize with it or whatever. So anyway, my opinion on the book is kind of a little bit divided. So I mean, for the first 100 pages or so, I could say that I thought the prose was okay or even really enjoyable in some parts, like with the Mexican girl and all that. I really liked that writing and that storytelling, that kind of narrative. But, you know, kind of the longer it went on, the less interested I became. And the more I realized I just do not like these characters. I don't think there's anything insightful about them. I don't really care about where we're going from here. So, as far as rating it, I think so for the first half, or not the first half of the book, but the first 100 pages, you know, I think that kind of earns the book like an additional star or whatever. Just as the prose, the writing itself wasn't altogether that bad, or even in parts was quite good. So that kind of earns the book at least 1 star. But I don't really think I'd give the book a star for anything else. So basically, since a book begins like as 1 star, that's like the lowest you could go. I give it 2 stars, kind of just for effort and for the prose. Just the writing was altogether not that bad. So 2 stars for On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I am kind of a little bit surprised about that because since it is a stream of consciousness book, this has probably like been the most enjoyable stream of consciousness book that I have read. So from that standpoint, especially because I was considering the book to be my least anticipated read of 2025, because of that, the book was kind of, I don't know how to say exactly, but it didn't quite meet my expectations. It exceeded my expectations, if anything, but still only a 2 star rating, so it's not something I would recommend really. I would point out though that I think every book would be a recommended read because you never know what you will enjoy. So maybe this is just something I did not enjoy, but maybe you would. But still, I would not tell you like, hey, you should go out and read this book. I am still glad that I gave it a try, and I don't feel like I gave it too long of a leash. So reading about 120 pages or so, and it did kind of feel like a grind to read it because it is kind of a little bit small print. And yeah, so I mean, it kind of read like more like 200 pages instead of 120. But still not an altogether waste of time or whatever. I'm still glad I tried that much of it. And since it's such a well-regarded book or whatever, a real prominent book, especially about the Beat generation, this is kind of like the masterpiece of that generation. This is like the seminal work or whatever about that generation. You know, I'm glad I read it from that standpoint. So at least now I could have some opinions on the book. Whereas if I just tried to read like 10 pages and was like, oh, no, this is crap, I'm not liking this, you know, I wouldn't have been able to talk about the book at all, really. But obviously, because of the length of this video, I've had some things to talk about, which is a good thing. So anyway, so my main conclusion is that the prose was okay, the writing is okay. I can't say that Kerouac is a bad writer, but in terms of like the actual storytelling, the characters, the plot, really, the premise of the book, like what is it leading to? What is the point of all this? I just didn't get that at all in terms of like telling about the characters and having relatable characters, having characters I understood or that I rooted for in some way. I did not get that at all. I did not feel anything for Sal, Dean, or Carlo. I don't feel I know these people at all. Beyond the fact that I know they just like drinking and drugs and trying to make it with beautiful women and then treat those women like crap. Oh, I also didn't even talk about like there are incidents in the book where like these guys commit crimes, like where they talk, I think about like stealing things. They try to steal like money here and there. And I even think that Kerouac was kind of involved in a murder. I think someone he knew, one of his friends, may have killed someone, and he helped like hide that person, the victims, something about their property. He, like, I forget what, like their watch or something. He basically like buried it for the person who killed that person. So he was pretty much like assisting with the cover up of a murder. And again, like I said, how they just like left the guy's girlfriend in the Arizona desert when she ran out of money. So these are not really good people. And also the guy who's like beating his girlfriend, how she was black and blue after a fight. And also on top of that, the way he describes like some black characters and homosexual characters or whatever, like the derogatory language he uses toward them, and like the line about the blessed patience that the blacks picked cotton with, their blessed patience, and how he wished he could have been a slave so he wouldn't have had to worry about life. He could have just contentedly worked as a slave his whole life. So these people are just repulsive people. There's nothing good about them. They're snobs. They look down on other people, and they're despicable people. They're deadbeats. So I don't care that like, ooh, these guys are writing poetry and sharing it amongst each other. They're real intellectual people, and they're discovering their place in the world, and they're just being. They're learning about the essence of being. I just don't care about these guys. They're moochers, they're deadbeats, they're abusive people, and just, yeah, I didn't like the people at all. But anyway, so yeah, 2 stars for Jack Kerouac on the Road. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Bye.
2, 3, 4.